All right, so this is documented in GitHub, the uPortal project GitHub IO repo. And there's actually a document called Roadmap. We try to keep it up to date. Here's a little spiel on kind of the goals of the roadmap and the fact that we try to curate it at quarterly milestones. And then I've described what we mean by differentiating, integration, and parity. Right. So I'll give you the quick overview, and then we'll jump back to the slides. But I wanted to just make sure you'd seen this. Parity means, what do we need just to be in the game, right? If we don't address things that we call parity efforts, then people will stop using uPortal. Right? We need to be off of Java 8. We need to be off of Spring. Just the security frustrations and the fact that the tech gets too old, those are things that fall into parity. Integration would be APIs, so it's not related at all really to parity, other than integration is such an important concept nowadays for web applications. We need to make sure that's got its own category. Differentiating is what makes uPortal special compared to other portals and other applications. If we went and dropped portlets and went web components, there's nobody else that I know out there that's doing it. I don't even know a lot of players in the space, honestly, but if we had web components that were truly flexible, versus what I think is mostly out there for portals is a bunch of square boxes that launch apps, right? That's what Octave does. That's what one or two other things we've seen. They don't have a lot of other integrations. We have much richer front ends from yours to some in the sample deck that if you haven't seen, I'll share that with you. So going to web components as an example, migrating to newer frameworks that are lighter and easier to use, at least for ours that are pretty lightweight web components. Anyway, let's do this slide deck. Going to review the slides. Again, I was assuming we were going to have a 2-hour break, so this is going to be real fast. We'll look at the current roadmap doc again in a little more detail, and then really it's about looking at each one of those compared to what we talked about the last hour. Try to get some prioritization. That's just the stuff I had earlier. Talk about the things. I do just cut and paste. No slide deck's useless. Yep, it is. Okay, going back to this document. So when we're talking about the roadmap, I'll cover each item so that it's not just a couple of words, so you have some backdrop. And then we'll talk about ongoing tasks and future tasks. So converting portlets to web components is what it implies, is we would really like to take web components, portlets, replace them with a web component that is mostly functionally complete. It doesn't have to be. And then with the REST or resource API, and the idea is we could rapidly develop new web components. Talking about just our conversations here, I'm already seeing like, I don't know, we could have, if this portlet was already a web component with the API, we could have made 3 different web components and made some very interesting front ends, right, or changes to how people use that particular service. So I think it really modernizes our portlets and expands potentially how quickly we can refine the front end and make it suit our specific needs. Well, so I'd imagine every school could potentially use certain resource APIs, and the front end could be the standard one, or they could just run off and make it their own. Because I'm thinking of the styling I've seen between you two, having icons show up and other ways to flag and highlight. Certainly best practices will bubble up, but allowing folks to just make it do what it needs to look like in their portal adds to how customizable it is. Modernized Quick Start is the effort where if you looked at Quick Start now, we see it a lot, you probably don't. It is bare bones. There's like tabs with like 1 or 2 portlets. It just looks ratty is not even the right way. It's bare. Like there's not even enough content to make it a good demo. So modernizing quick start is taking some of the new components we already built, get some free or open source images, and throw in a little bit more content, and start revitalizing it. So it's more of a showpiece, not necessarily like make it into a marketing website, but it should be appealing. It should be something that we aren't ashamed to show somebody.
Pre-built template.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would love for us to somehow figure out how we can switch from different layouts. You know, have something that looks like yours, have something that looks like yours, have something that looks like Netflix. Right. If you weren't aware, one of our developers a couple of years ago, when we adopted web components, he made what looked like what Netflix, right? It was really easy. It was 3 carousels. Yeah.
Carousel. Yeah.
Big carousel at the front, and then it reconfigured so it's the rows at the bottom. I mean, it's so simple. It's funny. But when we show some people, they're like, oh, wow. And then migrating web components, at least our community ones, to lit, because Vue just keeps changing, and staying current and patched is really a big effort. If we can get to smaller frameworks, especially when we're looking at how simple these JSPs for the portlets are going to be, web components that replace them, there's so little, there shouldn't be a lot of dependency. A lot of dependencies seem to come from the frameworks themselves as opposed to the code that actually is being used. Now, the exception is something like the carousel, where we're actually using the JavaScript library that implements the carousel, we're just using it, right? Okay, so that's a real dependency, but some of the stuff I've written, I'll show you an example. There's some of our cal file we put on there. Share that. Make sure it's not closure. I'll just go through this one. Yes, this is it. So this is what a lit based web component looks like. I'm importing the lit stuff up here. That's all I'm using from it. The only weird thing is I mentioned templates in the web component deck. It doesn't use it. It uses these special markers, CSS, and you actually embed it right in the class. They give an explanation of why they didn't use templates in their documentation. I wasn't thrilled about that. The simplicity was sure was nice. So here's get properties, constructor, a couple of setters, and then the render here is HTML, right? So this is, again, the template. There's a little bit of support on setting values. And then here's my JavaScript code. It's fetching, hitting uPortal API analytics, and setting up the search parameters when it makes the call, and then it processes back. This is only 202 lines, and there are no dependencies. There's no tooling needed. This literally, you just take the static file, reference it in your page, and it works. And I don't think we can get a lot of stuff to that level, but it sure is nice when I can literally just put that somewhere with uPortal running for the API, or reference a static JSON to mimic the API. And I'm not doing anything but using a browser and refreshing it. So that's what I'd like to get to when we're talking about simple front ends. Now, when we're dealing with container web components, of course, frameworks really come in handy. So it's just being cautious with how much we bring in. All right, so back to the browser. It's the wrong browser. Nope, that's the wrong one. I'm showing you guys this stuff. Yeah. All right, so that's web components, cleaning up APIs. We have some old APIs. We literally have at least three API endpoints that will give the user their portlet, the portlets they can see in JSON. And they're just formatted slightly differently because I think someone needed a different version, and instead of using the parameters to change the output or filtering through the parameters or just improving the API to be generic enough where both could be used, a new API was written. Maybe they didn't even know about the other API. So we had a couple of those where the same information is being provided through APIs and they overlap. So we wanted to clean that up. Is it a priority? Probably not, but if you're trying to integrate with uPortal and look at all the documented APIs, it can get really confusing. As a parity, we finished Java 11. We want to upgrade Spring 5. If you're not aware, portlets are their own web component or web apps, so you can change their versions, their dependencies independent of uPortal. So why not figure out how to do Spring 5 for the portlets before we tackle uPortal? And then Java 17 should be relatively easy compared to Java 11 upgrade, because there should be more backwards compatibility, surface area, or the incompatibility surface area between 11 and 17 should be much smaller. They're non-existent. And then real quick, just going through the ongoing tasks, we're always trying to address security patches, of course. We need to continue revitalizing our documentation for uPortal 5. Maybe we'll solve it by uPortal 6. There's just a lot of stuff spread out that needs to be consolidated and reorganized. We had this, what she was called, a document facilitator, a document organizer. She did really good with 4, and then she left. Hopefully she'll come back and work on uPortal 6. All right, Noah. What's your title? And then future tasks. And this is the stuff where let's start talking about what we've just discussed and how we want to prioritize things in the roadmap. So update Gradle to latest version. Again, as Michael pointed out, that requires uPortal 6 and Java 11 at least. Remove JAX-B. That's something, it just eases development because that stuff's all over the place and shouldn't be. Add more APIs. We don't have a specific need. That's really more of a, we anticipate someone to say, hey, it'd be great if you could surface this concept in an API for uPortal. Revamp the marketing site. That's actually already started, and that is independent of uPortal. Right?
Right.
And then standardize the JavaScript libraries. I could go on about the resource server and ask if you want to hear what we're going to do with that mess. If you're familiar with it, we could talk about it. But those are all the things we've currently added to the roadmap, and then what we're talking about now. At the very least, out of this conversation, I would like to, as a group, kind of brainstorm when do we want to target the release of uPortal 6. Notwithstanding the amount of effort that's going to go into it, we know school years are an impact. Like, is summer always the best time, or is it the holiday break between December and January the best time to have a major release? Testing has to happen before that, and before that, testing at your individual institutions. We have to get the product out the door, right, and release out there and ready for you, and have folks kick the tires, even if we're any kind of formal testing or plans to adopt it. So I'm thinking maybe a minimum 3-month ramp up between like a uPortal 6 release and anyone even thinking about releasing that in production, because I'm sure it'll surface things and we need to go and make a bunch of patches, probably more like 4 or 5. So when do you guys like to do your major releases with lots of testing?
I mean, if it's really truly major update, I don't think we would launch that towards the start of a term.
just to minimize the risk or the impact. So the starts of the terms are when there's the heaviest usage, so you want that to kind of go smoothly, right? So like if you're looking at a fall, we're on a, you know, a two
Semester.
term, we're not a quarterly. I don't know if you
Oh, no,
guys,
we are semester.
your semester, okay, all right.
Mhm.
You know, so if we did it in the fall, we would probably try to release it maybe mid-year, so that'd be like October, November-ish. If we did it in the spring, potentially spring breakish, so that would be mid-March. But summer would probably be the ideal, because in the summer, we've got like, you know, much smaller student body, you know, so the loads aren't there, if things come up, fewer complaints that we have to deal with, but yeah, we still have it, and that gives us a 2 or 3 month window to try to correct it. So I would, for us personally, I would think the ideal time would be
End of May.
yeah, late May or early June,
Mhm.
and that would give us the summer to work out any major bugs if there are any.
Okay.
I don't know, you guys.
Summer. Yeah.
so-
So summer before the fall orientation starts. So orientation usually start before the fall semester kicks in.
Like late July, early August.
Yeah, and if this one is just back end, you know, if we have something and then, you know, similar as what he said, but if it changes any UI, there has to be an end user screenshot, you know, because we are preparing for the orientation student guide. And then that has to be, so we need to give them some time for working on that. I mean, even for the testing environment. But usually, but if it's, we are just talking about the back end, then,
No, this is probably gonna be the big revamp. Well, I mean, we really haven't talked about changing CSS, so you're potentially the user, the student view won't change too much. It's probably the end of it, so.
oh, okay, I mean, if it's an admin view, again, I mean, if it's just me, that's fine, but, you know, I think I share with you, you know, with this group that we are, our major revamp, our project, our deadline is by June 1st. So
Mhm.
I don't think that I'm going to bundle uPortal change with that project together. That's too much change and then too many testing that I have to do.
Mhm.
So either that or we usually plan something on the December right after Thanksgiving. That's when the winter break, it is even slower than summer. But I'm trying not to look at Kevin because I want him to enjoy the holiday.
Mhm.
Holiday break, and then, yeah, so,
Yeah, since I get to help make those kind of decisions, I usually try to avoid the holiday breaks. I don't want any staff having to worry messing up their holidays, so.
but usually our hit rates, they are even lower right after than between the Thanksgiving and the Christmas.
Mhm.
So, we try to do major updates if it is like important. I mean, if we cannot miss it, either that time frame or the summer time frame.
Yeah, it sounds like summer would be better, so a release at least the, like maybe into Q1. And we're not even started, so I don't think 2023 is gonna be U4 6. We won't see U4 6.
So it might be released by the end of 2023, but it's not gonna be deployed anywhere
Correct.
before the end of 2023.
Yeah,
Well, I'm thinking if we have an idea of like what's our stick in the sand for it, there's no way we're gonna add everything we want. But if we know we've got until like February of 2024,
yes.
you know, we can start planning.
Yes, that sounds very reasonable, then, because we can prepare on our local instance or the dev instance, and then have enough time for the end user testing engagement. And then we can, I mean, I'm telling you, some of the testing it requires more than, depends on how many bugs, but at the same time, availability of our functional partners working together, it takes some time.
Mhm.
So, if we are doing any major February timeframe, that will, if we have something ready, then,
I mean, none of this, other than possibly the conversion of the portlets to web components. You're planning on doing this year anyways, not necessarily part of 6 though, right? That would be just part of 5.
Sorry, I was reading the chat real quick.
Yeah, so so in the 6, if we're targeting this, I mean, like everything here that's on the screen, this roadmap, these are all just We're still in version 5.
We kind of need to, yeah, we need to discern that, so let me find where was I?
So where I was going with it is if it's just Java updates and some of the API cleanups and those kinds of things, whether it's in 5 or 6, those we could probably roll out and test quickly. But as soon as you start touching the portlets or giving new features like the major ones that we were talking about, maybe making fragments optional or something to that effect, I think that's going to take a lot more testing and evaluation, right? So it kind of really depends on what you're talking about too. We can do pretty quick turnarounds on updates within a couple of weeks potentially.
Okay.
Audrey makes
Has
some
anybody
comments.
also looked at the Tomcat? So 10, they're moving from Java EE to Jakarta EE.
Yeah, we don't need any, we don't usually use any of that other than the servlet, JSTL, and the other thing that's bubbled with Tomcat. And I haven't looked at their restrictions, but I'm pretty sure we'll probably jump up to the latest Tomcat that works with Java. And a good question. So Nadia's asking about Tomcat, about are we going to require Java 11.5 for these updates? And the answer is yes for uPortal 6. That doesn't mean uPortal 5 goes away or we just completely ignore it. When we went to Java or to uPortal 5, there was, when we make a major release like that, there's early adopters and then there's a large group that kind of just waits and then slowly adopts that. We hope that speeds up quite a bit, but we're expecting that we'll still have to do patches and even maybe a couple of feature releases of uPortal 5 to help people kind of stagger along until they're ready to upgrade. But we're hoping if we can get the timing down better, because historically a major release would be announced at Open Apereo, which is in the middle of June. Well, if you don't get, and then that's just the announcement. If you're not getting the uPortal major release until July, no one's going to adopt it for that coming fall semester. So we need to have something, it sounds like at the beginning of June, that folks have had the chance to kick the tires. We feel very confident that we're not just in a release candidate. We're actually in like, 6.02 or something like that, or even higher. And folks are ready to start adopting it. And again, uPortal 5, it's not disappearing. We're not, let's see. We'll see. Get on the new version.
That's them too. They're getting rid of all their own thing.
That's true.
Yeah, or
Forcing everyone to the cloud.
where you pay a big hefty fee, yeah, or basically. Okay, so that gives us a pretty good time frame of, we kind of have this year, it feels like, we have 2023 to get whatever we want into 6. And whatever we're talking about today, the plans can change. But that at least gives us a time frame. And now thinking about some of the stuff we talked about, does anybody want to say, I guess we all need to noodle on this, but does anybody want to say, yeah, I definitely want to see X, Y, and Z, or I have no care for a particular feature we've been talking about? And I'll throw one out there if you don't have a list already in your head. It feels like we need to be on a modern version of Java. Does that really matter at your institution? And I guess the person here that could talk to most about that would be Ryan.
From a security standpoint, I don't think it has to be this version, but at least an LTS version that's going to be supported before uPortal has to upgrade. I think JDK 11 is probably where we need to be at, right? What is JDK 11? A lot.
Yeah, but if you can support 17, that would be nice. I mean,
Yeah,
usually
that
it's
was
the
just came out.
right. I mean, it's the security aspects, and we have a lot of governance around keeping current. And if there are known issues, and you suddenly can't patch, or it's more complicated to patch the older ones, that's what really drives it. It's not that we specifically want it; that's what's driving it.
Yeah.
Even JDK 11, it looks like in support on September 2023, and at that point you have to go extended support. Probably be fine to probably get picked up on a Red Hat subscription.
I'm thinking based on everything I've heard and seen so far. Baseline everything to Java 17, that gives
Yeah.
us years of stability.
Yeah,
in there.
because right now you can run
2021.
11. You can run uPortal 5 on 11, so.
So within a year, if you can have something that runs under 17, then I like that timeline. And that should have minimal impact on anything that's front end, that seems quite realistic. It's something that you guys should be able to do, and then we can do our normal load testing and all of that without worrying about the interface and end users per se. So that's very achievable, I guess is what I'm saying.
And nobody cares about Spring other than we need to be on a Spring version that's being patched.
It's the same argument, yeah. Hibernate, Spring, all the dependencies, it's the exact same argument. So the specific versions, we don't care, but if it's in a long-term support or it doesn't have any major known security issues or CVEs, then
Yeah, so Spring 3 is not really supported anymore. It's not being monitored or patched, so we need to get everything off. And Spring 4, I think, is end of life as well. So we need to get off with both of those.
Is there anything where
years.
if we do this with the dependencies in Java that it would break, I guess we don't know, like portlets, but are we going to move off of portlets? I mean,
Yeah,
is there,
I'll flip that because that's a great question. Does anybody have homegrown portlets here online that they feel if we decided there's no more portlet support in uPortal 6, that they can't either rewrite it or engage the community to help them rewrite it? Does anybody have like some really extensive portlets? Because I've seen plenty of custom ones, but they're like a handful of JSPs, like 2 or 3. There's a little bit of Java code, but those won't be hard to rewrite in another technology like components and servlets. So, Andre, do you guys have any custom portlets that would be hard to do any kind of conversion if you had a year lead in?
No, we don't have custom portlets. As I said, we mostly utilize web proxy portlet, and if there is any complicated functionality, again, we just tend to do it in the external application. We're just single sign-on with Portal. So we tried again. Ported 186 to 86. It was like promising technology, but we didn't want to bind ourselves into specific things. So standalone Java applications, single sign-on with uPortal proved to be like way to go for us. So yeah, we're good in that regard. And maybe it's a good idea, just to pose this question, just to check the box on the user list, get opinion. Whoever wants to reply will reply, and so that later on there are no kind of unexpected emails that we didn't know, something like this.
Yeah. And I see Malini, you're on the call. Do you know how many custom portlets you guys have?
Yeah, we do.
I think about 10 portlets.
Okay, and none of them all of them seem fairly compact, that a rewrite wouldn't be a huge deal. Is that right, or am I mischaracterizing your portlet?
Yeah, they're all very similar. I think we need to upgrade that to use web components or some other training that we had from you. So we haven't worked on that yet.
Okay,
So
cool.
we're going to Java, 5.14 now, and after that, maybe if we have time, we'll update those portlets.
Okay, great, and we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
Soon. Okay, cool. So yeah, I don't think there's too many folks that are married to them. It's going to be more someone who's using uPortal that isn't engaged with the community, and all of a sudden they, for some reason, decide I'm going to jump up from uPortal 3 or 4 to 6, and there's no more portlets. I think we're fairly safe. Unless somebody comes back and says, no, I really can't convert my. it should be okay to move forward without it.
Let me just make a comment. I mean, from our perspective,
Uh-huh.
so we have a new project coming in. So should we build this new portal to the project with the keep in mind that there will be changes if we upgrade to uPortal 6?
Depends on the project, but you're probably fine, because you guys aren't writing customizations to uPortal, you're creating some other content. You guys are already adopting the approach of web components,
Okay.
and as long as you're using something other than portlet technology, which you probably are, right? So, yeah,
So-
you're probably fine. I
Okay.
don't see an issue.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, so, I just wanted to say that, I'm pretty sure that we will have some engagement with a Unicon in doing our future projects, so I guess we are pretty okay.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, Jim has a question here about what happens to web proxy when they go away.
Yeah, great question. The community portlets, we've been retiring some, but web proxy is not one that we would retire without a modern replacement. So a handful of these portlets definitely will be converted by the community. Certainly, Unicon is going to help with that. So we'll have a replacement for web proxy. Because it's essentially the special thing about web proxy isn't that it's going and getting HTML from another service and bringing it back. The special thing about web proxy, it is leveraging the portlet configuration custom page so that you can go in there and add a bunch of stuff without having to define it in an XML file. And that is something I'd like to address. I think we need to address before we move on. But it could be some kind of configure for web proxy that has essentially the exact same fields so that you could trim the target HTML to a specific div or whatever. Does that make sense, Jim?
So I know that we mentioned, and since this is sky's the limit, it was prioritize about removing fragments.
Thanks. Bringing that up now, talking and looking at this list, I think that's the lowest priority. That's
Yeah.
more Benito just threw it out there because people are annoyed by the data files, and that's probably not the best reason to adopt a feature change. But we should keep it on the list.
Okay,
But as you're converting portlets to web components, you're essentially giving us an ability to put web components directly on a fragment, which we don't have today.
That's
Right.
Yeah.
So it's still a step towards that.
okay.
yeah.
Like in our case, right now, we have our dashboard that I demoed this morning in a portlet on a fragment, right? We would be able to cut out, I would hope, actually, we didn't really talk about that, I guess, as you're developing or you're converting portlets to web components, there would be a mechanism where we can add a custom web component to a fragment, I would assume. We didn't talk about that.
No, and that should be added. And honestly, my thought was the baby step of we replace the portlet technology with web components in the API, but we would still potentially use a portlet, at least initially, and get that adopted into uPortal 5. And then uPortal 6 is where I think we potentially have a breaking change where now we don't have portlets, especially if we're saying there are no portlets.
Right.
Then we can just directly put things on the page as web components. I don't know if you've seen the demo of that. I forgot which app we have. It was in the Ontario community where there is an actual I'm forgetting a lot of stuff about who did it, but essentially they're just dragging and dropping web components in. So the technology is going to be almost cut and paste to be able to do that. Who was it at the Open Apereo a few years ago that was doing that kind of stuff?
I'm not sure.
From Pittsburgh. Well, anyway, it's pretty easy to do that. It's just, yeah, the support and technology needs to kind of be written. And I'm thinking while we're investigating it, we'll start ripping out portlets.
But even if you don't go as far as that nice drag and drop interface, as part of 6, or not within 5, but as part of 6, where now all your portlets have been converted to web components. That means you obviously have to have a mechanism to put them on a fragment, because the fragments haven't gone away. If you could extend that ability to customized web components, that would be great, because it would still cut out an extra layer for us. That's one layer gone. And then maybe version 7 would have the no fragments, and that would be the second layer that's finally gone. So,
Not on
now,
video, you guys can't see me dancing.
so now you got a roadmap for two,
Yeah.
2 years.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. We're coming on, we're getting a little past time. It's a great conversation, so I'm happy to keep talking for at least a little bit longer. But one of my colleagues here are gonna get hungry and rampage.
So just a real quick recap. So, I mean, so far I've kind of listed about 8 things. Realistically, what does 1 year kind of encompass? Have you?
So my perspective on that is that we have to have a priority list. We have to figure out what's the most important thing, start working on that, and see how far we can get, and then tackle the next thing. Because the community, we don't have a lot of spontaneous contributions right now. A lot of it currently is Unicon based on the programs and those who have joined our programs. And again, thank you very much. I think that goes a long way to keep the uPortal alive in certain regards. So we have a certain amount, we have a limit of what we can do. And it's our issue is we have 2 different constraints. One is we have a total bucket of hours that's limited by quarter, but so key developers will get pulled off onto projects, and so these hours can just potentially accumulate sometimes, and we'll get to it eventually, but that really would throw off some kind of planned effort. Luckily, we've got Michael, who's been very much focused on uPortal, so that's been nice. I think we just can create a priority list, maybe start doing some targeting, but we know just from experience now over the last few years, we created this roadmap and stuff just gets pushed and pushed and pushed. Because our priorities outside of the roadmap and new features are security bugs and making sure that, well, it's really about security bugs and making sure we can release and things don't get too archaic. We did release a portlet last month, and it was the first release in over a decade. So probably isn't used too much, but still, we're into stuff like that. Does that help?
That helps. Yeah, I just want to set expectations. And also, I mean, if there's contributors out there and maybe something that is not as a heavy lift of something like Java 17, but maybe this web proxy replacement, maybe there's a contributor out there who can kind of help assist with that, or efforts towards portlets, moving them to web components, because we have people here who have that expertise. That might help to kind of push things along quicker.
Do you think it would be helpful if we had a monthly or bi-monthly?
Yeah, because I think we talked about this, is maybe having more of a working group structure. Something that developers who possibly will end up being committers while working in this group can kind of help contribute to some of these lower hanging fruit items. And we can meet regularly, maybe monthly. And, I could, of course, help kind of, project manage this a little bit to where we can kind of get closer to our goals and objectives. Because I think that, you know, of course, you know, some of y'all have contributed, you know, hours, you know, subscription to Unicon, to do some of these, and it's great. And, you know, we can do this heavy lifting things, but at the same time, we also want, you know, being on the steering committee, we also, and being involved in Apereo, we want to build our community and we want some contributions. And whether that's documentation, like we discussed earlier in the week, or even like contributing towards the web component areas, you know, that would be perfect.
The other thing too is this doesn't have to be just coders who are going to try to get, you know, have work assigned to them.
Right.
I think we really just, if we have a monthly meeting, that we seriously look at the roadmap, because currently I am just like guessing.
Yeah.
And moving stuff around, and it'd be
Exactly.
fantastic to have more input.
I think by meeting monthly and having this group, it kind of, there's kind of accountability. You know, you put dates on things, you work towards it, you know, just, you're just consistent enough to get that feedback that it starts moving the needle. And, you know, we can, you know, just get closer towards closing out these things. Because there's a lot of different areas that, you know, even design, you know, if anybody's a front end developer, you know, that could even help.
Yeah. Well, just a combination, right? Folks contributing anything, but ideas are just as important in direction.
And testing, PRs, you know, testing is really crucial. And some of the even security, some of those little items in are, sometimes there are just like simple dependency updates, and those we could knock out, you know, quickly as well. So yeah.
We certainly have labeled, just to put a pin in this, that we have gone through PRs, and before events, we'll go through and mark them as, you know, a good first, or good PR for you know, first contribution or something. So that way, if you're kind of just new and trying to not pick something that's really hard, there's some small things that we'll label, like, you know, anyone can do this, they just need to have a little bit of technical knowledge. It does vary, right? We expect you to at least know a little bit about coding to be able to handle some of these PRs we mark as first, you know, your first try or first contribution, versus documentation first contributions are, you know, you can write pretty good. You get English better than the English I speak anyway. So anyway, I think, yeah, we'll start. Sounds like there's some interest. We'll start pinging the mailing list and try to pull together a monthly all of this. Open for the community for discussing, reviewing, and hopefully, I think that's what's been missing. It's not just folks. It's not that folks don't want to contribute. I really feel that without direction, they just didn't know what to do. And if we kind of say, here's our roadmap, and as people see work moving and happening, then they'll feel more encouraged to it. I've been excited about what's happened in the last few months in the uPortal space. I've been happy to work on weekends and add some things outside of work, just because I really feel like I think this is the year that we kind of elevate uPortal to a new level. A lot of things are falling into place.
Yeah.
Yes, open invitation to big new contributors.
Yep.
Anyway, with that kind of wraps up this discussion. We've got the recording. I think this is definitely one of the recordings we're going to want to capture the content, or what's it called? Translate it to text. Yeah. Yeah, to transcribe it, have a have that available along with the recording and we'll use some jumping off point. This is by no means the end of the roadmap for this year. This is just kind of.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Jim. Anybody else? As we wrap up, this is kind of the wrap up to the conference as well. This